Hello, everybody, and welcome to Gender Beasts, Monsters, Love, and Longing in BL. Um, Today we will be going over a few ideas. We'll first hit up the intro where I introduce myself. We'll go over a theoretic framework, some tropes, case studies where we see examples to kind of help us practice the theory, and then kind of delve into why these theories make people feel seen. From there, we will have a little conclusion, and that will be, unfortunately, where we end it for the day. For those of you who do not know me, I am Phoebe or Noodlefish, whichever you prefer. Many call me Noodle. Someone called me Fish the other day, which was just as fine. My pronouns are she, her. I am an evolutionary anthropologist, and I did my master's thesis on monster attraction, which is accessible almost everywhere. If you follow me on social media, you will see it. I'm also a lifelong BL reader and monster enjoyer. So, for the theoretical framework, well, why monsters? Monsters do predominantly two things, or at least the two things I will be focusing on. One, the cultural function of monsters, and two, monstrosity as a construct overall. So monsters mark boundaries, culturally, that is, right? They define what counts as normal. If it is not normal, it's usually, for whatever reason, categorized as monster, right? The unknown, other. Now, every culture creates monsters, and many do it in a way where it polices behavior and desire and entity, right? Or it's not entity, sorry, identity. And this is like when you hear someone say, you're acting like a monster right now, right? And it's mostly because of they think you're acting cruel or aggressive. And then when you're doing, or I guess I'll keep that for a separate slide because I do go over that. I'm going to stop myself right there. Anyway, monsters exist as they exist at the edge of society. Rather, they are neither fully inside nor are they fully outside. The best example of that is the werewolf, where he is neither human nor wolf. He is other. And because he's other, he doesn't quite fit into either one of those categories. He's quite isolated, right? There's no sense of community, and the idea of self is really iffy. Now, monstrosity as an overall construct, a monster is not born evil, right? And instead, they're really given that title by society. A monster is not a monster until society deems it as a monster. And I just thought of that quote from Wreck-It Ralph of, you may be a bad guy, but that doesn't mean you are a bad guy, you know? So it's the same thing. They may be non-human, but that doesn't mean they are evil. Now, physical differences often stand in for moral judgment. And by that, I mean that when you look different or when you act different, people seem to want to put labels on you that do not always fit. They immediately put on their own biases or prejudice, and it's quite sad. The label of monster also reveals more about societal fears than the creature itself, right? So if we look at, or if we think of incubi or succubus, they're not necessarily, it's not the monster itself that's scary, but sexuality, lust. Now, if monstrosity is a socially constructed thing, then queerness has historically been framed the same way. And why aren't you? There we go. Okay, so this gets us into queer theory, or at least the basics of queer theory, because there's a lot that goes into it, and we do not have the time. I know I talk fast, but I don't think I'm talking fast right now. Anyway, queerness has usually been considered othered right? It is an othered identity. Queerness has historically been framed as unnatural or excessive or deviant. And systems like legal and religious medical systems have historically pathologized queer desire, right? So, like with religion, they say you can cure it, or medicine, at some point they were trying to find the gay gene, right? And legal, they feel like you could easily hide who and what you are. And we see that with the resurgence of lavender marriages. Although I myself would love a lavender marriage, that's for different reasons. So the rhetoric used against queer people often mirrors language used for monsters, right? People will, at least the ignorant, will try to keep their babies away from you because they say you're going to corrupt them the same way a monster would corrupt someone. It's not quite the same, though, and for very obvious reasons. Now, many queer people grew up learning that their desires are wrong, especially if they grew up in more conservative areas. And this kind of feeds into their inner thoughts, where shame produces secrecy and hiding and self-surveillance. And with monster narratives, they externalize these internal struggles, right? It's like the curse or the beast within reflects internalized stigma. So again, bringing it back to werewolves, because they are the most famous example of this, where they're constantly like, please, no, I don't want to let what's in me out. I cannot, I need to hide it. They're very afraid of themselves and of others, and all of that comes from the shame and idea that there is something wrong with them. Now, monsters are well, historically, at least not historically, but like fictionally, historically, they're stared out and hunted or hidden, right? And queer bodies have historically, as in real life historically, been regulated through surveillance. You know, I do believe, when was it? It was in the 19 something, during one of the world wars, right? When there was a quote unquote, or a quote, gay hunt within the Navy, right? Or if you knew one of your service members were gay, you were supposed to report them to a higher up so that they could be fired or whatever. I think it was dishonorable discharge too, which is terrible. And so queer individuals have, at least socially and culturally, always been forced to hide themselves in environments where they are not safe to be who they are. Now, in BL, the monster often fears being seen in its true form, right? And this, again, mirrors the fear of exposure, of, if I come out, am I going to be persecuted? Am I going to be treated differently? So the monster, again, as like a concept, is not random. It's more of a symbolic container for queer otherness. Now, moving into monster theory. Um, I do believe they're in here. I just saw you. Um, I can't say her name, but it's the cute little facey face. Because I can't see, you changed your name for this server. Um, anyway, you would probably, you know who I'm talking about. No one else does, but you do. You would probably have much better. Oh, there you are. Hi. If I'm saying anything that is inaccurate here, please correct me. You probably have a much deeper understanding of this than I do, simply because you come from it on a more humanity level, whereas mine is more, biology and fun stuff. But that said, I'm gonna go back to the PowerPoint. Thank you. So, there are three ways that monsters are kind of like, they work as boundary figures, I guess. And those are liminality, desire and danger, and the erotic charge of transgression. Right? So for liminality, monsters occupy thresholds in which they are between human and animal, or life and death, sacred and profane. Queerness also disrupts rigid binaries, right? Male and female, dominant and submissive, human, inhuman. These are all things that queerness, well, maybe not the human, inhuman part, but these are all things that queerness doesn't really, you can't fit it in a box. It is not binary, as we all know. And BL uses supernatural figures to dramatize these blurred lines. Monsters also threaten the social order, right? Queer desire has historically been framed as socially destabilizing in the same way that monsters have been viewed as a threat to society. And for that reason, it could attract, or it could cause attraction to the monster simply because it's attraction to what society forbids, but also in a way of self-identity, right? And for the erotic change of transgression, we're going to go more into how taboo intensifies danger, right? Like if it's the same idea of teenagers drinking, but once they actually become legal, they kind of stop drinking as much, right? It's no longer fun when it's allowed. And so taboo, the novelty of these things, it intensifies your desire for it. And the monster embodies excess, right? Large amounts of strength and hunger, immortality, scale, and the erotic power in monster romances often come from this imbalance, right? As in like size difference, immortality, predator and prey. These dynamics allow safe exploration of power and vulnerability with the readers. There we go. Next slide. So, why does this work in BL? Well, first, BL, it kind of becomes a safe space, right? It operates outside of strict realism. It allows creators to exaggerate emotion and beauty and devotion and supernatural elements, heighten intimacy and stakes. So it's just, it narratively, it draws you in by allowing you to unapologetically be greedy in every way possible. Now, with queer design, also, like, speaking about BL and monster romance, monster romance kind of bypasses traditional gender scripts to begin with, right? So it gives you queer desire without heteronormative constraints. And there, the power between the monster and the human isn't neatly mapped the same way that normal romance between a hetero couple would be, right? Because usually that would be gender rolled. And so the non-human lover kind of destabilizes rigid masculinity and overall gender expectation, and gives you more fluidity with what you can and cannot do, or at least express in narrative. With monsters are with emotional why can't I speak? Extremity. Monsters often love obsessively and eternally, right? They have much longer lifespans, and because of the nature of who and what they are, grabbing onto a love is so rare that they often make you the center of their attention, and it's like you are forever wrapped in their heart. And immortality itself amplifies this devotion of, you know, this thing is going to live forever, and you obviously will not, but they are still choosing to devote all their time and effort into you. And if they truly do love you, they may love you for way longer than you will be on that planet or in that reality. in that story, however way you want to view it. Physical danger also intensifies tenderness, right? A creature capable of destruction, choosing gentleness, carries far more emotional weight than if something that was already inherently gentle was already gentle or treating you gently. You know, if like this 50-foot thing is gently holding you and patting your head and making sure that they do it in such a way that it doesn't hurt you, they are making conscious decisions to make sure that you are okay and that their love is coming across. So monsters as mirrors. Um, well, the first mirror is the fear of hurting the beloved. Many monsters or monster characters isolate themselves to protect others, right? And this goes back to, and I'm pretty sure I just kind of rambled about that, but how queer self-denial is rooted in shame. So when you combine the two, or when you have a monster as a standalone for queer experiences, the narrative arc usually will involve being accepted despite perceived danger. And it kind of acts as a type of light closure, right? Or if you're not quite at the part of closure, then you still see yourself in having to hide who you are in order to, and in this case, not protect others, but to protect yourself. Or maybe others, if you're afraid of how it'll come off to them. And then we also see conditional versus unconditional love, the difference between how society or societal love often feels conditional for queer people, right? Compared to heterosexual and cis individuals. It feels like you have to fight to prove who you are or to have attention, affection. And in monster romances, where it centers unconditional aspects of a person or a thing that does not fall under the normal socially acceptable love interest, it makes you feel seen. And the lover, being the monster or you, gets to see the truest form of the other person, and you still choose to stay. So it's that wanting, that craving of being accepted for who you are and what you are without having to mask yourself or fear rejection in some way, shape, or form. With the transformation and self-acceptance, which is a little bit of what I just babbled about. So the main or the key question to ask here is, must I change to be loved, or can I be loved as I am? Right? Some monsters transform into a human, whereas others remain monstrous and get embraced anyway. And so it again makes you reflect on queer experiences and the inherent I want to say biases that people have, and the fear of never being enough for something that cannot be helped, such as sexuality. So emotional catharsis. There are three major parts of emotional catharsis within most monster romances, right? And this is especially true in queer monster romance. There's first recognition, where the reader sees their own shame reflected in the monster, right? And as the story continues, they witness acceptance enacted through said romance. The monster is able to be loved and love in return. With release, it's the confession scene, which becomes symbolic of unmasking, right? Of a queer individual finally deciding that they're gonna come out. And with the monster, it's an embrace that becomes socially absolute. And it's the same way, right? Once a queer individual comes out, it's finally like a weight is off their shoulder. And whether society accepts them or not, the point is society now knows, and there's nothing left to hide behind. And fantasy as rehearsal, it's like these stories rehearse the possibility of being fully seen, right? They offer a model of intimacy where differences or where difference is not erased but cherished and loved. So we now get to go into the tropes bit. I'm afraid about the time. Oh, I think we're still I think I'm halfway in. I think we're good. I think. Um, I thought I clicked that. Sorry. Okay, so I never fixed the title of that. I am so sorry. This is not social and economic influences, as much as we would like it to be. This is supposed to be desire, danger, and the body, and major tropes. I am not going to go into economy. Please don't ask me. I don't want to bring out my BA in business. I'm scared. Um, okay, so the first trope is the dangerous protector, right? And the core structure of this trope is that the monster possesses overwhelming strength or supernatural power. The human lover is physically vulnerable, and the monster chooses resistance. And resistance matters mostly because power without control reads more as horror. Now, there's nothing wrong with horror elements in romance, but if you're in it for like the fluff, it kind of changes the vibe a little. And power with deliberate gentleness reads more as devotion, because again, they are going out of their way to control themselves. And this emotional payoff lies in the I could hurt you, but I never would. I love you. You're my baby. Within queer subtext, though, many queer people are taught that their desires are predatory, right? Like there's that whole argument, a couple, I'm pretty sure it's still going on actually, where they call themselves people attracted to minors, are trying to put themselves in the queer community. Now, I'm not going to talk about my stance on any of that, but I will say that I don't quite think they fall under the queer community. And I'm not going to have that argument just because it's not, I shouldn't. But right. Many queer people are taught that their desire is predatory, and the monster kind of internalizes fear of harming the beloved, their human. And the story kind of reframes desire as protective rather than corrupting. For embodiment, which is the where are we right now? Sorry, I am referring back to my notes, but my notes are a mess. Right. Embodiment of NBL of still, again, the dangerous protector is that immortal gods and demons in works like Heaven's Official Blessing carry cosmic power, yet center devotion against their partners. Right. And things like giants in the Titan's Bride, with the literal size difference and physical vulnerability, they go out of their way to the body becomes proof of trust, right? And touch that could crush you becomes careful. And so dangerous predator tropes convert fear into chosen tenderness. For predator and prey dynamics, well, there's an eroticization of threat. Vampires, demons, and carnivorous creatures depend on consumption, right? Biting, feeding, and chasing are framed as intimate acts within monster romance. And hunger becomes a metaphor for desire, which kind of goes back to my body horror panel, if you saw that. So another metaphor for hunger and desire. Consent as a tension point also comes into play with predator and prey, right? The predator needs to, like, there's a narrative risk of collapsing into coercion, um, of your love being so strong that you end up taking it a bit too far and hurting your beloved, right? And BL often rewrites feeding scenes as negotiating intimacy, especially when it comes down to vampires. Are you willing to give them your life force? And usually, even when the vampire partner is like, I want you, I want to drink from you, occasionally I even think about draining you completely. I just thought, Armand, you get him away from me. That queen pisses me off. Sorry. I got distracted. Um, so BL often rewrites feeding scenes as negotiated intimacy, and that language shifts from survival to mutual longing. And of course, the body then becomes site of exchange. So blood drinking or energy sharing function as symbolic union, and penetration imagery often mirrors like sexual intimacy, right? There's a reason why when vampires bite you, you both kind of let out a moan. Um, and being consumed becomes being chosen. Uh, the monster also fears its own appetite half the time. The beloved accepts the hunger instead of rejecting it, and this frames queer desire from excess to intimacy. So predator tropes kind of stage the fear of being too much and kind of resolve it through acceptance of knowing that the other sees what and who you are and still wants every bit of you. For size difference and physical imbalance, there's the visual exaggeration of it all. Extreme height and strength differences, height and vulnerability, right? The smaller partner usually appears fragile, with the larger partner having to calibrate every movement. And because of that, there's like a weird power dynamic, right? Like physical dominance doesn't really equal emotional dominance, and the smaller partner often initiates intimacy, and that comes from the fear of the larger partner hurting the smaller one. And so it kind of becomes like care is reciprocal, if that makes sense. Now, for queer relationships who are often scrutinized by imbalance, monster romance kind of foregrounds imbalance, right? And then stabilizes it through trust. And so the fantasy lies in the safety with asymmetry, knowing that that the other partner, your other half, is still going to treat you gently, or at least in ways that you deserve and care to be treated. And so exaggerated bodies make vulnerability visible and trust legible. The gentle beast, we go into reversal of expectation. So monstrous exterior signals, well, the monstrous exterior signals threat, right? So like the outer portion is just terrifying, like dragons, right? When you look at a dragon, you're not gonna think, oh, it's so cute, like a giant fluffy baby duck. No, you see it and you think, is it gonna eat me? And in what way? But the interior of said dragon could reveal shyness and loneliness or tenderness. And so the narrative arc kind of centers around revelation of figuring out who and what that is. And it often leads to like an unmasking scene, right? Where the true form is revealed. And there's that moment of fear of rejection where they think that you're not going to love them. Especially if it's like, I keep going back to a werewolf. I don't know why they're on my mind. I mean, I kind of know why they're on my mind, but where they're like, I'm going to show you the doggy part of me. And they're like terrified and like shaking that you're not going to love them, and you're standing there saying, no, honey, I can play fetch with you. I don't care. It's you that I want. And so acceptance follows, right? And many queer readers identify with hiding parts of themselves. And then the reveal scene stages a fantasy of unconditional recognition within themselves, of if I come out, people would also love me regardless of that. And love does not require transformation into something normal. So the beloved touches the monstrous body without like, and this is like a moment of catharsis, right? It's when the human touches the monster's body without flinching, right? And physical contact kind of dissolves their shame of and self-hatred, and so the body becomes lovable rather than grotesque. And that's how the gentle beast trope kind of transforms disgust into desire. Um, Immortality and internal devotion. This one's kind of straightforward, you know, scale of time, immortal lovers frame love as infinite. The human fragility contracts with like endless existing contrasts. I don't know why I said contracts. Contrasts with endless existence, and time becomes an obstacle and a promise, especially when they themselves can turn you. And devotion as an extremity is that eternal love counters narratives that queer love is fleeting, right? The monster waits centuries. I mean, look at Dracula, right? He literally waited centuries for Mina to be reincarnated and then just as quickly fell in love with her. And instead of just assuming that she would love him back, he tries to woo her because it wasn't a possession thing. It was, I love you for your soul, and I know you're gonna love me for mine. So let me take my time and relish us falling back in love with each other. And the scale of time kind of validates intensity. You know, like the longer the monster waits for you, for their love, the more intense that love for you is. And so, like, this kind of takes us to transformation through love, where some monsters regain humanity through affection. The best example I have of that is Spike and Buffy, which is, I'm sorry to all those who love Spike, or not Spike and Angel, although that is a great ship. Buffy and Angel, I didn't see it. I didn't see it. It's Buffy and Spike. I'm sorry. He not only went through the painful transformation of gaining his humanity again, but he did it because he loved Buffy and wanted to help her. I'm so sorry if I spoiled it for anyone. Please go watch Buffy the Vampire Slayer, if nothing else but for Spike. Right? Other monsters remain immortal, yet emotionally charged. And love becomes evolutionary rather than corrective, right? Like immortality amplifies longing and positions queer love as enduring overall. Now, for the last trope we're going to cover, because there's a lot more, but I genuinely feel like 6 was a good amount, and I've kind of rambled for a really long time already. The body as text. So marking and claiming, like bites, scars, and magical bonds, they leave visible traces, right? The body records the intimacy, and the marks can symbolize belonging rather than damage of this is my person, and I am their person. And then, of course, there's the physical transformation of the body as text, where wings, horns, and claws signal difference from the human, and some narratives remove them as a signal of acceptance. I kind of feel like that's weird, though, because why would you like remove these differences for that monster to become accepted if you want to accept them in general? But sometimes I guess it's worked in a way where it's them accepting themselves. Like if it is a curse, like Beauty and the Beast with Prince Adam, like him him learning to love and become a better person turns him back into the person he was supposed to be, which was the prince. I disagree. I think he was much hotter as the Beast. I don't know why they drew him like that, and I'm very mad at Disney. Anyway, others keep the monster and like the monstrous figures and just reframe them as beautiful in general. And of course, supernatural bodies exceed human limits, right? With strength, regeneration, and sensory intensity, heightening physical intimacy. The monstrous body kind of becomes aspirational rather than object, and the body carries both stigma and fantasy, which BL reassigns as meaning. So these tropes as a whole are not really decorative, right? They structure how desire feels in the body with fangs, claws, towering height, hungry immortality. Each exaggeration manifests a real emotional question of, am I dangerous? Am I too much? And will you stay when you see all of me? Monster Romance in BL takes like all of those questions and stages them through physical extremity. The body becomes the battlefield and the bridge. When danger turns tender and when hunger turns to choosing. When the body is touched without revulsion and fantasy resolves into something deeper and deeply cathartic. That's when we move on, or that's how I feel like I could have closed that up a little better, but for the sake of time, we're just going to assume that I did a wonderful transition sentence, and we're going to go into the case studies, right? So let's practice everything we just went over, and by everything we went over, I'm sorry. We begin with Heaven's official blessing. So, multiple types of monstrosity, right? I mean, the obvious being that they are ghost king and cursed god and fallen officials in general. But in terms of like the framework and tropes, it's also powered titled to like exile and stigma with rumor, right? Hugh Chen is both feared calamity and a devoted lover. He takes up both spaces. And of course, there's the otherness and reputation that is affected, right? Hugh Chen, I hope I'm saying this. I constantly butcher Mandarin. I think this is Mandarin. Right, so Hugh Chen is defined by how the world labels him, and his identity forms through marginalization instead of myth. And Ziglian is repeatedly casted out and humiliated and stripped of his status, and yet they repeatedly do it because to them it's who they are. Who would they be if they didn't try? You know, I don't think that was big. I'm sorry. And then of course devotion as counter narrative. Hugh Chen's love spans centuries, right? And his power never really translates into coercion. He kneels and waits and protects without demanding anything. All he wants to do is love and be of service to his love. And within queer resonance, there's, of course, public shaming versus private intimacy of you walk out that door and you immediately feel like you're being judged or you're going to be judged or you fear judgment that day. Whereas when you're inside and you and your partner can be together, it's lovely. Much like how when the two of them are together, it's, well, lovely. Love that sees the ruined self and, stays. And with the mortality aspect of the two, it amplifies the longing and endurance of their love and affection for one another. More so on one one's part because they were actively waiting, but I'm still gonna count it, you know? Also, I've only gotten to like the first, I think there's multiple books. I've read the first two books. I don't think that's the end of that. So if I'm wrong, I am so sorry. Um, but like a cathartic moment to highlight in all of this is when Ji-len's scars and like his failures are acknowledged, but without disgust or disappointment, rejection. Monstrosity here becomes sacred devotion, and power exists, but it kneels to the other. Love is the thing that overpowers it, more or less. The Titan's Bride. Okay, so types of monstrosity. Again, giant size. He's quite literally a giant, and well, the other one's just a tiny human. I forgot their names right now. I do believe it starts with an M. I would Google it, but I don't have time. Oh, great. Now I'm singing to you. I'm sorry. And so extreme size difference works here as a visual metaphor, right? The body kind of becomes a spectacle where physical imbalance foregrounds vulnerability, where care becomes visible in touching and positioning, because they did have to try a few times in a few different ways to fully be able to get freaky, I guess. Yes, Kaius and Mizuki. Thank you. Thank you. And so their intimacy, or quite literal sexual acts, they require negotiation with one another, but mostly in terms of who is going to be positioned where, and how the body is elastic. Now, I remember seeing the size. It's been a while since I've read it. I kind of got confused after a while, just because I feel like the story kind of took a turn. Um, but yeah, I don't know how his body takes it. I don't know how Mizuki's body takes it. I really don't. Physics. Um, where was I? Right, erotic charge. The fantasy of it exaggerates penetration and containment and closeness, right? The smaller body is not erased, it is centered, because Kaius has to make sure he works around Mizuki's body and to find what works for the two of them. And so pleasure depends on attentiveness. If he gets too aggressive, or if the position changes too quickly, it could hurt Mizuki. And so attentiveness, again, is something that he must have an abnormal amount of focus on. For queer symbolism, this could be the fear of being overwhelming, right? The fear of being too much. And Caius's gentleness that he chooses, it kind of, it's his proof that difference can be navigated without harm, right? And as like a catharsis, Mizuki starts initiating desire, despite knowing that at any which moment that giant penis can rip him in half. And the power imbalance kind of stabilizes through mutual trust. Um, Oh, I never. Okay, there we go. Monster and the Beast. So, types of monstrosity. Again, visibly non-human creature marked by fangs and claws and long hair and little horns. I love him. He's a baby angel. But like, in terms of what he experiences, there's a lot of social exile and isolation, right? Like he totally falls under the gentle beast dynamic. He assumes rejection is inevitable by everyone. And then the second he meets his human other half, whose name also escapes me. Why am I so bad at names? I don't know if I've told you guys this, but I regularly forget how to spell my own name. And if it weren't for the fact that people call me that, I would probably forget my own name. um, but his human partner kind of approaches without revulsion, right? Like even in the first meeting when yes, Cavo and Liam. Thank you. Oh my God, Liam. So when Cavo and Liam first meet, Cavo's kind of, shy, hiding in the background, and Liam already has a decent idea that he's there. And throughout their first interactions, it's always Liam that's kind of pushing the boundaries, and Cavo who's like, I can't do this. I can't do this. No, what if I go too far and you don't want me anymore? And then the scene that really comes to me is when he is, oh, actually, I should wait until I get lower to talk about this. Where am I? Right, shame and self-perception. So Cavo has a lot of self-hatred, right? And it precedes external cruelty. He feels as though he deserves to be unloved and treated horribly. And his loneliness shapes identity more than violence. I mean, he's not even a violent person in general, but he's just afraid, and that can sometimes, self-defense can sometimes come off as violence to those who are, I guess, ignorant. I don't know. And with touch as transformation, physical contact between the two is where we start seeing a turning point in their relationship. Cavo starts becoming a little more secure in himself and his relationship with Liam, and the body he once thought was grotesque and unlovable becomes desired, especially since Liam is quite literally a freak. Poor Cavo was not ready for any of that. Sweet baby, right? And so the emotional release of it all, which is the confession scene, which was centered around, fear of abandonment, and then later I'm gonna cry. The God, I love him. The acceptance that reframes monstrosity as lovable, and it's the moment where he's in that, I think it was a hotel room, right? And he was waiting for Liam to come back, and he waited for days, and Liam's like, I'm not gonna come back unless you tell me what you want. And so when they do finally reconnect, um, Cavo immediately says, I want to be with you. I I don't like being alone. Shit. Sorry. I hope my voice didn't crack. Ah, God, I love him. Okay. Fangs. Again, vampire boyfriend in a contemporary setting. But the deeper part of that is that the supernatural kind of exists in a normalized kind of way within like daily life, and the tone shift. You go in thinking that it's going to be some story about like a secret vampire mob, and there's going to be a lot of gruesomeness and everything, but instead it's far less gothic, and it kind of focuses on like humor and domesticity. Domesticity. There we go. Domesticity, in which, the domestic life takes the center stage. And this matters because, the monster is integrated into ordinary romance. The fact that they are both vampires is nothing special. It's nothing new. Why is that important? Like why does them being a vampire stop, or yeah, why does that stop them from living a normal life? And as a like stand-in, it could kind of say that queer love is depicted as stable and lived in, right? Um, and of course, there's like body and hunger conversations in this, in which feeding is reframed as negotiated intimacy and desire is acknowledged without moral panic. So when they choose a part, so the way fangs works, if I'm not mistaken, I hope I read it right, is that when you choose a partner, you're usually feeding from your partner, right? And of course, you can choose your partner. Partners are usually together for long, long time. Um, and so knowing that you are going to feed from this person, you are now negotiating the relationship in general, right? And feeding starts becoming a way of being intimate with each other without needing the actual intimacy, although that does happen in many, many, many of the vampire couples. I mean, why wouldn't you want to sleep with them when they look that hot? The art is also really good. If you haven't read it, I highly suggest it. And so, at least with fangs, monstrosity can exist without tragedy, right? They're going about their normal day and being in love and happy. Well, that's later on. In the beginning, they're more mentor, right? They're friends. It's friends to lovers in a way, and it can simply be part of like everyday queer love. So across these case studies, right, monstrosity is never just an aesthetic. It carries stigma, hunger, exile, scale, immortality, and yet again and again, BL reframes these qualities as worthy of tenderness. The monster becomes a mirror. The lover becomes the one who does not look away, and in the gaze, shame shifts into recognition. And so these stories endure not because monsters are common in BL, but because when they appear, they kind of concentrate queer longing into something visible and embodied and transformative, you know? So now we're going to ask, why do these stories stay with us? Now, this will hopefully be quick because I do believe I am slightly running out of time. Um,
Okay, as we have created this stage especially for you, you can go over the time if you need, so don't stress out. You can talk how much you want.
oh my God, you have given me way too much power. Thank you guys so much. I love you.
I'm glad. Okay, I will let you go back to
Thank you. Hi guys, I could bother you for longer. I'm gonna keep you forever. Well, until Barkeep closes the server. But um where was I? Right, okay. So now we answer, why do these stories stay with us? Now, the psychology of the otherness is what we're going to touch on first. The one, there's social stigma and identity formation, right? Pure queer people, again, often grow up in environments where their desires are framed as wrong or excessive, unnatural. There's repeated exposure to stigma, which shapes your self concept or their self concept. And the language used against queer people have historically overlapped with language used for monsters, like deviant, corrupt, predatory, all things, again, we have talked about. And this internalizes shame. Um, and shame kind of differs from guilt, which guilt says, I did something bad, whereas shame says, I am something bad. Uh, and although they both can live together, they are two separate things. They're like twins, um, fraternal twins. Yeah, they're usually together, but when you separate them, they're two individual people, and you can kind of tell that they are two identical or two different people. And so monster narratives literalize this. The character believes their nature is the problem. And with BL monster romance externalizing that shame into like claws, fangs, curses, and immortality, it it becomes more of a metaphor. And the metaphor itself works simply because direct realism can feel too close to, drama. And so the fantasy creates a distance while preserving the emotional truth. And the monster becomes a safe container for difficult feelings. Um, with Desire Without Apology, there's, reclaiming intensity and erotic power of validity and the appeal of extremity. With reclaiming intensity, queer desire has often been policed and pathologized. Pathologized. There we go. Monster romance amplifies desire rather than minimize, and hunger becomes mutual rather than corrupting. The erotic power and validity of it all, of being wanted by a powerful being, validates the self, right? The monster's overwhelming devotion counters narratives of disposability. There we go. I don't know. Disposability. And immortal or dangerous lovers frame queer desire as worth risking everything for. And then, of course, lastly, of this, just that little box right there, the appeal of extremity, where monsters feel intensely, they love obsessively. Emotional scales match the scale of social rejection many queer people experience. And so the fantasy says your love can be vast and still be good. Right? So like these stories kind of allow desire to exist at full volume. Um, Moving to the fear of being too much. Uh, Queer people are often told that they are excessive, that they're too loud or too visible or too sexual. Monsters embody excess, just plain and simple, right? Excess size, strength, hunger, longevity. And so it kind of creates a reversal of narrative where when the monster assumes rejection is inevitable and the beloved chooses them anyway, it kind of labels the excess in a way in which it's cherished uniquely and not damned or judged, right? And the reveal scenes in these arcs mirror coming out, the where fear peaks right before acceptance of I don't know how many of you have come out or will come out or whatever, but like there was at least a moment that I remember someone close to me where we were talking about when they came out, and they were so terrified that what they were about to say was going to destroy their life, their friendships, their family. And oh my God, I'm very emotional. It thankfully was not the case, but for many it is. And so although valid, uh, these narratives kind of help us or help people rehearse the idea of being fully seen and not abandoned. So, in a way, the fantasy resolves the anxiety of exposure. For power, safety, and trust, um, there's like a really big negotiation imbalance, right? Uh, Many monster romances feature physical or supernatural imbalance. Either they're powerful or they're magical, they're gigantic. Doesn't matter. The point is, as a human, you are just a little lesser than the monster, right? And so trust must be explicit and sustained. And so consent becomes central rather than implied. And safety within like danger. The monster is capable of harming you, and yet they do not. And so safety is chosen and not assumed. And the dynamic kind of mirrors queer relationships built outside of heteronormative scripts, right? Where you find what works best for you and your partner without relying on other people to project or correct the way you are loving. And all of this, I guess, matters emotionally because there's safety that is chosen feels stronger than safety that is guaranteed. It's the fact that they can choose at any which point not to, but they are, again, going out of their way to do it anyway. And so devotion in monster romance is often deliberate and vocal. They make it very clear that they want you, and you often make it clear that you want them. And I don't know why I keep talking to all of us, including myself sometimes, because I'm including me in you. That was a sentence. Uh, as though we are like YN in a monster story, but that's what I'm doing. Where was I? Right, so like the beloved is not protected because they are weak, but because they are precious to the monster, right? So power does not erase the vulnerability, it heightens the meaning of care. For catharsis and recognition, we're talking about the moment of, acceptance, where the lover sees the true form and fear does not translate into rejection, and physical touch seals the recognition of knowing the other. And we, like, literally, it's always, I just thought of Twilight when he's like, I'm a killer, Bella. And she's like, you're beautiful. And he's going on in his depressive tangent. And then she goes up to him and starts touching all up on his body while glittering. Sorry, tangent. Anyway, that's the moment of acceptance, right? A really good example of it, actually. And so readers are able to project onto the monster's fear, or at least queer readers are. And acceptance kind of provides emotional release that may not be found at home or in their daily life. And so the narrative answers the question of what if I am loved as I am, and the body, well, the monster body in general, like the scars, wings, fangs, and everything, they could be reinterpreted as becoming beautiful, right? The difference between aesthetic and erotic rather than grotesque, of these bodies being shifted from evidence of shame to proof of desirability. And in cases like this, the catharsis is not subtle. It's very embedded in the storyline and in the relationship between the partners. Now, lastly, community and fandom impact. So there's monster romance is rare in BL, right? I mean, it's not super rare. There's quite a bit of it, but it's not as popular as other genres, right? So when it appears, it kind of condenses themes of like exile and longing and devotion into heightened forms, because you're not exposed to it as often, and people don't use these uh, storytelling methods as frequently. And with what am I trying to say? Right. With monster romance, there's the emotional efficiency of it all, of supernatural stakes accelerating intimacy, with physical difference making like metaphors visible. This an example of that would be, again, the feeding, and with the supernatural stakes accelerating intimacy. That's I would hate to bring up Twilight again, but like she very quickly fell in love with him. The fact that he was a vampire, and he admitted that he was a vampire, kind of gave them like their trauma bond kind of thing, did accelerate their intimacy, even though for a moment I'm pretty sure he was like, okay, you're a little intense for me, slow down. And she's like, no, 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 I need you in me. Anyway, the audience kind of understands that the stakes are high, and they understand what stakes there are in general and pretty quickly. And of course, there's like a repetition of the core fantasy of, queer individuals thinking I am different, and you see me and you stay, which is again mirrored in monsters where they're like I am different and you see me and you stay. And so the formula kind of remains emotionally potent across cultures and forms. And so like monsters in BL, I guess, resonate because they transform stigma into spectacle and shame into desire, right? I said that sentence weird. I'm so sorry. They transform stigma into spectacle. There we go. And shame into desire. I hope that was more easy to understand and follow. They allow queer readers to watch fear externalized and confronted and embraced. And these stories do not erase otherness, and they kind of aestheticize it. They eroticize it, and they insist that what was once framed as unnatural can become very foundational to intimacy. And when a monster is loved without being cured or hidden or diminished, the story stages a radical possibility that what makes you strange might also make you worthy. All right, so with that, we are coming to an end. Monster romance in BL functions as a metaphor for queer difference, right? It externalizes shame and turns it into spectacle. It reframes monstrosity as desirable rather than deviant. And this niche subgenre within BL, its rarity makes it, what am I trying to say? Its rarity makes its symbolism, like the symbolism within it, concentrated and intentional. And when a creator chooses monsters, they're choosing heightened metaphors for what could be a queer analogy. So to go back to all the sections, with section 1, we established monsters as mirrors. With the second one, we unpacked desire, danger, and the body. These were like the tropes and all that fun stuff. We ground theory in specific texts such as Heaven's Official Blessing, The Titan's Bride, and Monster and the Beast. And with this last section, section 4, or was that section 5, Numbers Confuse Me, it explained the emotional resonance rooted in desire, shame, and self-acceptance. So with all of that, I kind of ask that you, as the audience, as you're reading your favorite monster romance, I'd like for you to ask yourself what fears, desires, or forms of shame these monsters might carry. And maybe the act of loving the monster on the page may mirror the act of accepting oneself. And may monster romance in BL persists because it transforms stigma into, again, desire, and it turns otherness into a site of recognition rather than rejection. And for all of those who may not have found that yet, I wish you the best of luck and the absolute happiest life you could possibly ever have. And that extends to people you may know who have not yet experienced that. And yeah, that's about it, right?
Thank you so much. It was really a great panel, and I see the comments are crazy and all congratulating you.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry. I feel like I rambled a lot and went on tangents, but I'm glad you
It
guys
was
liked
perfect.
it.
Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
of course. How long did I take? Do you know? Was it?
Just 10 minutes more than your hour that you have planned. So,
Oh, perfect. So I didn't kidnap you guys for too long. Okay, cool.
no. But I think some people wanted to be kidnapped longer.
Oh, well, ask Barkeep. Maybe they'll let me keep you. I don't know.
Thank you so much. Have a nice day.
Thank you, you too. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Love you. Pop into the discussion if you have any questions.